Yes, I'd like to open the meeting. Let's call the meeting to order. Thank you. Copy for you. Take a few minutes, take a look. Make corrections, we can take care of that. Would you like a copy as well?
The ones I did? What about the ones I did?
Oh!
I sent them to you yesterday.
Oh, that's right, you did. You know what? I got so busy today, I didn't even know.
We can see.
Okay.
You want me to make copies of them?
Which is, you know what, I think it would be good to, let's do this one. I'll take those back. A little extra.
I've got a notebook, I'll just
Okay.
I hate to waste paper.
Boy, I do it all, it seems like I do it all the time.
It's terrible to waste paper, but sometimes you have no choice. You do something and that's like,
I'm a teacher, believe me.
oh God, I'm sure.
So,
Glad you did this because I was trying to listen to the recording of it and the audio quality is not great. You can pick up a lot of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is it because of that?
It was whatever camera they had. It wasn't that camera, it was a different camera. And I
Oh,
just, some of the
'cause we were out
audio
there.
quality was just kind of garbled.
Right.
I was kind of sweating trying to do them.
well, sorry, you can correct it, we've got this, because I wrote a lot of stuff down.
Perfect.
You know, the important thing is we have the motions and the votes.
Yeah.
The rest of it will be good.
So
And
ye-
welcome to the meeting.
Years ago, we used to do
Delighted to
shorthand.
have you guys. Thank you. We're happy to be here.
That would be nice.
Okay.
Oh, wow, that was quick.
Yep. We'll just take a minute, a few minutes and read this. Different minutes. Okay, so we have two sets of minutes. They go back out again. So we have the 4th and the 18th.
Oh my God, now we gotta read through? Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I would, any corrections on the minutes for the 4th of February? Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
So
4th of
moved.
February. Second?
Second.
All those in favor? That's done. Okay. And then, how about the minutes of the 18th? Even though I've given, I'll email them to you so you can put them in a nice format, okay?
It's good, no problem.
Okay. Any corrections?
I have one,
Good.
Tracy's name. There's no E on the end of it.
Where?
Okay.
Where? Which one?
In the attendees.
Oh, no.
That's from the 4th.
Shin.
Mine is the one that normally gets missed.
Anyway.
Anyway.
18.
Okay, and
I think that's
also
okay.
ClearGov, I don't know if it's a clear.gov or.
I don't know either, I
It's
just.
ClearGov, capital G.
And is it .com or?
Nope.
So there's no.
Well, that's how you can find it, but they refer to
Oh.
themselves as ClearGov.
No dot between them.
There's no
Okay.
dot.
Okay. So, any other corrections? If not, I entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
Make a
Se-
motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'll shoot those over to you when we get them. Okay? Now, since we have the folks from the library here, why don't we just go to them first off? You're welcome.
Well, first I want to say thanks for inviting us. It's our pleasure to be here. Our purpose for being here is to provide context for the budget request from the library and to answer questions. Dick Passeri, trustee chair, sends his regrets, though I really don't think he does because he's probably sipping a cocktail, gazing at the sunset as we speak. He's in Florida, but he initiated this meeting, and I'm sure he does regret not being here on some level. We had two other trustees that couldn't be here for scheduling, because of scheduling conflicts, but we do have with us Dick Raven and Alec Burke, our brand new, spanking new trustee. And I just have to say I have a wonderful board of trustees and an amazing staff. I'm incredibly fortunate to work with these people. I also just wanted to clarify that I'm not retiring anytime soon. There's been a rumor going around. I certainly am going to retire, but it's not going to be this year or the next. And with the way the stock market's going, it might not be until I'm 80. And I think Alex was going to say a few things.
A few thoughts just pulled together. The first of which is this. Among the departments and institutions which make this wonderful town move forward, the library is unusual in that it possesses an elected board of trustees. Well, 4 of them are elected and I was in, so. But an elected board of trustees nonetheless. And what that means to me is this. The town of Newbury, in its wisdom, entrusts us trustees with stewardship relative to the library. As regards its staffing and also its tactical and strategic planning, and also its budgets. Our overall role, of course, is one of supervision and support to strengthen in any way possible these wonderful people who help the library move forward. Another thought I've had is this. Most of you, many of you know of my interest in the history of the town of Newbury. And it strikes me that our board, we trustees, are legatees of the support which the town of Newbury has granted over the years to matters educational and matters also regarding the library. Educational support indeed goes back to the very beginning of the community, back in the 1630s. The library's support is somewhat more recent in the 1920s. Goodness gracious, we're coming up on a century almost there as well. But the trustees value this historic support from the town, and we want very much going forward to pay that legacy forward. And we're trying very hard to do that through preserving memorabilia and documents, archives within the library itself. And also through our relatively new oral history project, Town I Remember, which has been wonderfully successful in its first 2 meetings, and we're hopeful will become even more successful going forward. In fact, we've got folks clamoring to participate in one way or another. But the library also makes available to anybody, folks who are interested in their own history of their family and of course of the town itself. In many ways, the documents, the memorabilia, the archive, and also we have subscriptions to Ancestry.com, which everybody needs something online to move forward. So in terms of availability, in terms of support, we trustees believe very much in supporting the legacy we've received from the town and paying it forward. And for us trustees, we strive always to be a credit within the library itself and within the town community. And those are just my couple of thoughts.
Can I just throw at you as president of South Byfield Cemetery?
Oh,
Yes, ma'am?
No, but I email when we have changes at the cemetery because there are so many Newbury Byfield people that are laid to rest there.
Yeah.
You know, whenever we have a burial, or I send it to the library.
Good.
Or when we sell lots or whatever, I send it to the library because of the project that you do. It's like, we gotta keep you guys up to date. Because people go to the library looking for the ancestral history, because how are they gonna find it at South Byfield? We don't have a website, we don't have.
Find a grave.
Find a grave, and actually, Jim, who's the current assistant superintendent, and I, we're both members of Find a Grave. It's kind of creepy, but still, you gotta, but people from, case in point, probably 3 or 4 years ago, gentleman contacted Leslie, and he was from, I want to say like Idaho or somewhere out there, and his relatives, his whatever great-grandfather, is buried there, and his name was Shubil Rogers. I can never forget that name. I never heard that name before. And,
Rogers?
And, yeah, really. No, the Shubil part. And he wanted to know where he was buried, because when he was a little kid, he had been here.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, he wanted to make a marker. His whatever grandfather had been in the Civil War. And he wanted to put a marker on that gentleman's grave. And so we got him in touch with it, and Consigli Stone put it in for him, and he was so happy. And it's like, this is his heritage. And this is what people are looking for, their heritage. And if they can't go to the library, they can't go, where else do they find a grave or ancestry? Where are they gonna go? And back in the olden days, there was no such thing as ancestry.
Yep.
So how did they find them? They didn't. So I think when we all work together, it really makes a
Years,
difference.
they found it by talking to Dick Cunningham.
I know, but now
It's
we
all
don't
up in
have
his
Dick
head.
anymore, because everything was in
I know.
his head.
Yeah.
He was a great source.
Oh, he
It
was.
was marvelous.
Yes. How the heck he remembered that, I don't know.
I know.
He did.
Yeah, it was his life. And of course, it always raises the question, speaking of the cemetery, why is it in Georgetown? But never mind.
No, part of it's in Byfield.
Yep.
in South Byfield and part of it's in Georgetown. And a lot of the back part is Byfield.
Cool.
I don't get it, but
Well, it was a
it's South
parish,
Byfield, it's South Byfield.
where they split it up and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But one of the efforts Jean is spearheading within the library is to try to work with other organizations which have interest in ancestry, in heritage, within Newbury itself. The Council on Aging for sure, the Sons and Daughters of the First for sure, the Museum of Old Newbury for sure,
Yeah,
and the Newbury Historical Commission, and of course it spills over into the Georgetown Historical and the Ipswich Historical, and something you haven't got time really to do, but it is in the gold packet, you know?
right, right. But I have another update for you. I just haven't mailed it to you. We
Good.
emailed it to you.
Well,
We sold some coupons.
oh, wow.
So, I think it's great. We've talked about sort of the library in its past. I want to talk just a very little bit about its present and its future. Most of us who are gray-haired anyway grew up at a time when libraries were sort of these massive and exciting warehouses of mostly written material. And our library, like so many, is evolving to meet the needs of our users and our patrons every day. And it's just, I've been this is my second term as a trustee, but I spent 5 years as a trustee about 15 years ago, and then I came back. And the differences between then and now are just astonishing. And in this evolution is sort of, we have the library of things. You can go and take out baking pans and all kinds of other things that you might use in your life that aren't available. And more than anything else, as the internet has absorbed so much of our modern life, programming has become central now in the libraries to its core. And Jean will give you some data in just a little bit about how much that's changed even over the past 2 or 3 years in terms of how many programs we're offering, how many people are coming through the library, what they're using the library for. And so I just want to set that as a kind of framework because we worked with Jean over a lot of hard readings to work out a budget request that had three goals: to support the increasing needs from the public of materials, programming, and services, and including the long-range plan that we've had in place for a while now to be open more days. And that's our ultimate goal. The second goal is to create efficiencies for Jean and the other staff by hiring a lower paid level administrator to relieve upper staff who are being overpaid to stay envelopes and put stickers on books and do all this work that really could be handled by a lower level person, so that a lot of more important work that the library wants to be doing can be done on behalf of everybody in the town. And so, to allow the staff to really focus on what's in their job descriptions, lastly and most importantly to you guys is for us to build a budget structure that allows us to gradually meet the municipal appropriation requirement, which you may know something about. I know we sent you information about it, but if you don't, it's a requirement to maintain certification with the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. And Newbury has the longest waiver in the history of Massachusetts, 16 years. And we have been told this year, and every library's been told, we're now on a 5-year clock. And if we don't meet what's called the MAR within 5 years, we will lose certification. And Jean's going to go into some details about what we get by being certified and what we lose when we're not. And so incrementally, we're looking to step the library's budget up so that we can reach that goal within 5 years or perhaps even sooner. It's what we're facing. As Jean will explain, this sort of functional problem has been with the library since the construction of the new building. We believe, though I wasn't on the board then, that through guidance from the Mass Board, the budget was set much higher than the town could absorb, but that figure never goes away. They hold us to that figure. It's like, I always have described it as, you know, the bunny in the belly of a snake. It's like, it's just, you know, it's there, and it doesn't get absorbed. You have to go
I
back.
would think of that. Girls would never think of that.
You know, that is this undigestible thing that we have to figure out how to solve. And we need you guys to help us, you know, solve it, because this is what we're facing, and we now have a clock, which we didn't have before.
Who have you petitioned in the past to change it?
The Board of Library Commissioners.
That's as far as it went?
Yes.
Okay.
But, excuse me, I told you, Tracy, I have
Yeah.
made some progress. For years, before I was director, they were just very rigid about
Right.
and inflexible about
Right.
our situation. But I was able to do some negotiating and really have put us in a much more favorable position than we were, which I can elaborate on now, or I could. Okay. I'll leave my notes on that. So the MAR, I don't know who knows the MAR or understands the MAR. I'm telling you by the look on your face.
We
So
don't
it-
understand it much, but we do know, or at least I do, that the library has received a waiver for,
For 15 years, yes.
16.
yeah.
Well, yes,
16.
this is the 16th. It's quite complex, but to explain it in simple terms, it's a statutory requirement. And it's basically put in place by the state to ensure that municipalities adequately fund their libraries. That's basically the logic behind it. And it states that in order to retain certification, a municipality must appropriate a figure of at least the average of the last 3 years of municipal appropriations to the library, increased by 2.5%. So I could go into great detail here, and I'd probably take up the whole meeting, really trying to explain the ins and outs of it. But I think what's most important for our purposes is to focus on where we are right now. Dick mentioned the 5-year plan. So before, I was able to do these recalculations with Mary Rose Quinn from the Board of Library Commissioners. I was finally able to make her see the predicament that we were in, that we were almost being penalized for having been somewhat over budgeted way back when, and just never, ever being able to catch up. Plus, you know, after that, there were cuts and all of that. So, and then at one point, building expenses were taken out of the budget, so that affected our actual appropriation. But before the recalculations with MBLC, we had roughly $134,000 to make up. And with the recalculations, we have roughly $27,000 to make up, which is basically an 80% reduction. So that was the best news we had heard in forever. I mean, it's doable, you know, as we've spoken, it just
Right.
wasn't going to be
It
doable.
was never, we'd never be able to address it, you know.
Exactly, that's great. So with the budget request as it stands now, if that was to be approved, we would have roughly $4,000 to make up. What we get with certification is interlibrary loans. Our data shows that Newbury residents borrow 60% of their materials from other libraries in the consortium. So this saves the town considerably. Without certification, Newbury would be a standalone library, and residents would have access only to materials in Newbury. In other words, they couldn't go to Newburyport and use their Newbury library card, or Georgetown, or anyplace else. We get state aid funds, roughly $8,000 a year. The library uses these funds to offset expenses not covered in the municipal budget, including at the moment some salaries. We would lose these funds. And access to federal and state grant money, including the Small Libraries and Network grant, which we have received for several years, would no longer be available to us. So that's the MAR. I was going to just say a few things about the library if there's time, just the current health of the library.
We're here just for you. We have a few other things to do,
Yeah,
but
I know. We really wanted to make this very quick. so I'll try to go quickly. Over the last year, we've had annual bookings, room bookings by community organizations, and that's not just the community room, that's all the meeting rooms in the building. We've had hundreds, private lessons, parent groups, Tai Chi, tutoring, craft guilds, all meet in the various rooms in the library, and that's up 30% since 2018. So managing these bookings has resulted in a significant increase in staff workloads. In 2017, 28,000 people visited the library. In FY19, 37,500 visited. So these are people that just basically walk through the doors and take out books, go to programs, including children. We currently collaborate, as Alex mentioned, with the COA. We have quite a few of their events at the library and their workshops. We've collaborated with the Historical Commission on some of the archival material, the Recreation Committee, and the Museum of Old Newbury. We provide streaming media, which is called Canopy. It's a Netflix-like service for free films with your library card. And we provide tech help for users. We have a volunteer that comes in weekly, and plus we have ever-growing tech questions for staff. What's challenging for I and other staff to do, because we're bogged down in clerical and other constantly evolving tasks. One example would be securing grant funds. There are many grant funds that are available through the Board of Library Commissioners. However, up until now, I've been very hesitant to encourage the staff and myself to apply for them because they are known to have a lot of requirements. They're labor intensive. It's a lot of paperwork and record keeping requirements, and at this point in time, I simply don't want to stretch the staff any thinner than it already is. We want to organize and manage the archival materials in our local history room, which have languished since we lost the reference librarian position over 10 years ago. My requests for staff compensation level adjustments are related to this issue. Currently, the one librarian that is working with these materials is paid from outside of the municipal budget at her regular rate. We'd like to do more outreach, getting the word out about the services the library provides. We're still amazed by how many people come into the library and don't know that they can borrow an ebook or an audiobook with their library card. They're just, they think they have to go to Amazon. So, we really want to get the word out about what we can provide. And we would like to do some more coordinating of access to archives with the Museum of Old Newbury. I think that's pretty much all I have. I was going to go on to the MAR, but I already touched that.
Yeah, let me just add one little thing about the MAR. I mean, not only is it about the budget, there are also requirements for number of days open, for so many staff hours, or it's not just so our constant move slowly upward has will at some point require us to have more the higher the budget gets, the better we'll be able to meet the MAR and meet all of its requirements that we currently do.
Gee, we were recently gathering some data. I know Eileen was working on it relative to building expenses and those types of things. I just wanted to understand, so just because it's paid outside of the library expense budget, we can't count those expenses towards it?
The way they did the recalculations was
Yeah.
they added the funds that had been spent on building and utilities back into the
They did add
AR.
it in. Okay,
Right.
okay.
So that spreadsheet that I sent out with the yellow and all the different
Right,
colors,
right.
that's how she got the MAR down to the point where we're just so much more closer to reaching it. But she could only do that for 3 years, so I think she did it for 2017, 18, and 19 to give us the FY20 MAR.
Okay,
But that still requires, she can't do it anymore, she could only do it for 3 years. So that requires the building expenses to be added into the FY20 budget, as I had said to you.
has to be under, it has to be in library expenses, so the library trustees are gonna take over all the maintenance and management of the building now. I just functionally wanna understand how
Yeah, I
this
know, I
will
mean, that's
work.
what I want to talk to you, you know, and then the trustees do too, and
Yeah.
further, because I realize it's problematic to, you know, if James is managing the budget, but it's actually, you know, in the libraries, it's a line item for the libraries, so I look to you for advice on how to make that work.
I think it has to go one way or the other, because what happens under municipal law is you have to sign under the pains and penalties of perjury that those goods or services were received. So it would be I guess the majority, or if the trustees have appointed one member to sign off, they would have to be the person saying, yep, you know, that we did the HVAC work, we did the whatever. I just don't understand why they're so rigid, they can't just accept it out of a different line item. It seems
I
silly.
think as,
I know you've been fighting the battle for a long time, it just
Yeah.
seems.
No, you know, not every bureaucrat is unreasonable, but often the rules on which they ride are so.
Absolutely.
They're terrified of setting precedents. You know,
Right.
It's just, and, you know, you can often talk to someone face to face, and, you know, Gene's accomplished
Tremendous,
a
yeah.
tremendous amount through one-on-one, meetings and phone calls, you know.
Oh, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and this is the kind of thing we want to free her to be able to do, so that she can do more of it, because look at how successful it is. We'll figure that part out, you know.
yeah, I mean, we did, back in the day, before I was director, it was called public, I think before you were here, it was called Public Building Maintenance Account.
Right,
And we paid, and that was when the building expenses were taken out of the library's budget, which was done for a whole nother requirement, which I won't go into here, but it probably wasn't a good move.
okay.
So, you know, once that happened, you know, it was before my time, it was removed from the budget. I know for a while, before James was around and Sam Jocelyn.
We didn't
before-
have a facilities
We-
person.
Exactly.
Right.
So we did pay for those, we paid those bills, the trustees signed off on them. So, you know, I think that's doable. It's mostly FY20 that I'm concerned about, how you do it after the fact. That's,
I mean, I'm not sure.
yeah.
I'm not sure we can, because town meeting has voted it, so I don't know the mechanics of that. I could certainly talk to someone at DOR's legal department and broach the subject with them.
Mhm.
But I'm also, I mean, I'm happy to advocate, if the trustees don't mind going beyond the library commissioners to maybe a higher level to see if we can't address this. Because I don't even know the history of how the original number was set for the library's budget. I don't know if anyone was here long enough to know
Which
that.
initial?
The initial
When we
one
moved
that
into
set
the
it
new-
so
when we
high
moved into
that
the present building.
yeah.
It
Right,
was,
so
you know,
we were
times
moving
were
from,
flush.
you know, a library above a general store, right? I mean, it was a,
Sure.
you know, it was, what?
The mini.
Speaking historically. And to this, you know, brand new building, and so that we
It
had
was
no,
Dutchies, it
you
was
know,
Dutchies.
clearly there was no knowledge about what it would take to
You
run the
didn't have the
building.
historical
And
value.
I'm sure
Well,
there
it
was some, you
moved
know,
into another
enthusiasm
building
in
before this
Boston to
building.
help us figure out a big budget, but I don't know
Yeah.
for sure, because I
That
wasn't.
was in
here.
that little small.
So somebody crafted this budget based on no historical data and said, this is where we're gonna start, and town meeting funded it?
Oh, yes, that
So
was
town
Lois
meeting
Anderson.
funded it.
Oh, my
She
God,
made
yeah.
that happen.
At that level, and then subsequently they went, oh my gosh,
Exactly, I
this
think it
is
took, what, 2
too
years?
high,
It
he's
was a
gotta
little
cut it
long,
back
little
down.
longer than that.
Okay.
Yeah, and they needed to cut it down.
Yeah.
And then it was just one bad move after another,
And that was before 2009 when everybody was cut.
Yes,
Okay.
but then those cuts happened as well, so we
Afterwards.
just kept
Going
spiraling
further
downward.
down.
And
Got it.
so they take the average of either your municipally appropriated funds or the MAR, they take whichever is higher. So the MAR just kept being higher every year, so we couldn't get there.
Joe, you
Excuse
had a
me, yes,
question?
is there any private fundraising done specifically for the museum?
For the library?
For the library, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
we do try to do that. We've gotten a few grants. Got a new,
No, individuals within the community, like someone to host a cocktail party or someone to host
Yeah, you
a...
have
Well,
friends.
the Friends of the Library have a series of fundraisers and
Mhm.
and plant sales and bake sales and other events that raises quite a bit of money. And a lot of that money goes for programming. And
it basically, almost all of it goes for programming, although this year they leased a copier for us.
Is it a significant amount of money that's raised each year?
Last year it was 13,000.
By the Friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the year before, is it up from the year before?
Yeah, it's been going up every year. We have a wonderful Friends group.
But that money can't be
It can't be
counted
included.
against
No.
that
No, I
formula, yeah.
it's just a safety valve that relieves the budget from having to do other things.
I totally understand. They want to make sure that the library isn't being cut disproportionately from other functions of government. But ours is a little unique in that they established it at the wrong level, if you will.
We've tried to convince them for years, just forget, just
Reset.
look at,
Yeah,
that's what they
our
did.
budget.
That's what she's done.
And our budget is very close to the library budget of similar towns of similar size.
It's a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
under, but
A little
it's-
under, but I mean,
it's more
ballpark
Close, where it should be, yeah.
So we're not, our current budget, so we're not out of line, it's just,
Right.
we have this
This
historical
thing hanging over.
carbon.
So this 134,000 to 27,000 was basically the reset.
Yes.
And without meeting that, we can't participate in the MBLC? Is that what?
Well, we have, 4 more years now to do this. It's not
Right,
really-
right.
Yes. But you participate in the MBLC, but you don't, other libraries are not required to honor your patrons' cards,
Yep.
at their libraries. So you become a standalone library. Newry
Pariah
residents.
amongst library card owners.
Well, the theory is, well, our taxpayers are paying for our library, why aren't yours? I mean, that's just,
Right.
which makes sense.
And we lose access to state and federal grants. We lose a grant we currently have now, and we would lose our state aid funds.
3,000, yeah. Okay. And you've got 4 years from now to increase by 27,000.
Yes. But that's only if the building expenses for this year are included in the budget, which I thought, I kind of got the impression was going to happen.
I don't know, did you talk to Eileen about it?
No, in an email, I thought you said you and Eileen were working on it, so.
We're working on it, but there's no way to do it, because if we were a city council, you could just make a transfer. But we're an open town meeting form of government, so I don't have any authority to change the votes as made by the open town meeting. So it's something that will have to go before DOR legal. Lisa couldn't provide us any guidance.
All right, and you might want to speak to my contact at the Board of Library Commissioners.
Mary Rose Quinn?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote her name down to see if there was any possible way that they
Yeah,
could
because she
guide
had said
us.
something, she alluded that other towns had done this, and she basically said it was an accounting issue or something, that
Okay,
there was some kind of,
okay, yeah,
Imagine
I'm
we could
happy
get
to speak with her. Yeah,
Precedent.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, that just really would solve most of our problems, if we could do that, because the problem is, if that doesn't go in for this year, then we're stuck.
Then you're set back
We're set
again.
back again,
Yeah.
yeah.
I get it.
Because
Okay.
she can't do that for another year, she can't do that reset for another year. Or for more than 3 consecutive years, I should say.
Okay.
So does this fall to you as things to do, or is there something on our list?
No, I'll reach out to this woman and also to Department of Revenue Legal to see if they could give us some guidance. To me, it seems so simple, we shouldn't be doing all this wrangling over it.
It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see what we can do.
before I forget, if anybody's interested, I talked about the Library of Things and the evolving.
Yes, that was fascinating.
There's this great article that was in the Globe just this past weekend on the subject, if anybody, there's some copies.
Take it along. I marked that up, but I'm more than welcome to it.
Just so happens, this, covers
timely.
what's
So how do you
supposed.
get good things?
Sometimes donated, somebody donated a telescope we were all excited about, but it doesn't appear to work.
No wonder.
What do they donate?
I just donated some pans that I'm cleaning out my kitchen.
If you
And
bake.
it's on my list to do some really interesting things. There are some libraries that are doing like underwater cameras that aren't all that expensive.
Sure.
Microscopes, telescopes.
That meter reader, right, that
We have
turns how
them,
much
yes, that,
electricity you're
yeah.
using, yeah, that in there.
we have a volleyball set. A lot of people are doing power tools, bicycles, all kinds of things. I really want to try and keep ours as, I don't know what the right word is, but
Under control and
as non-silly, for lack of a better word.
Where do you store everything?
Well, that's becoming a factor, so we do have to find more room. One of the many things we want to do.
Great.
No, but one of the most amazing things is the shift from physical books, DVDs, to streaming. And so now your library card, and if you don't know Canopy with a K, you should check it out. It's an incredibly great service. It has libraries of a lot of great independent features, classic films, educational films, fabulous documentary collection, a lot of stuff that you can't find on the Netflixes and Amazons and stuff. You won't find blockbusters there, but you will find a really valuable, interesting resource.
Yeah, it sounds like it's shifting from our traditional libraries to more of a gathering place or
more of a
community place.
Yeah, if you take a look at that article, you'll see.
Yeah,
It's not, we're not the only one.
right.
Just say thank you all for what you do. I know when we first moved here 12 years ago, the library was the first place we found community. When Byfield said, "You'll never be part of this." And even now when I walk in the door and Jane turns, I was like, "Oh yeah, I've got what you ordered," and it just really makes us feel like part of something. So, thank you for.
Well, the trustees,
Thanks for saying.
we love Jean and we love the staff. They're doing such a great job. And for years we've been saying in our requests, we know how to do more with less, and our hope is to do more with just a little bit more. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
May I have this?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There's more propaganda for you, too.
We got all
I
of
think I have
that.
it.
You got that already?
Yeah, Marshall sent it to us already.
In color?
Yes.
Perfect, Marshall, good job.
Absolutely, Alec.
yeah, no, we just we got all of that information electronically. We sent it in.
Oh,
And
Yeah, I
But
wasn't
it's-
printing
for
it.
whoever's taking minutes, it's RAVIN, just.
I was gonna look all your names up on the list.
I wanted to save you from an addendum next time we meet.
Oh, God, you guys are crazy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank
you.
I will.
Bye. And I have regards to Tracy from my wife, Carol Baum, the Trash Tower artist.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Oh my God, I haven't seen her in ages. How's she doing?
She's doing fine.
Yeah,
For
wonderful.
you to
She's
have
still
it, if
walking
somebody
in
goes to
that
the library
area and
because they can't
collecting
find
her.
Yeah, she's
Absolutely.
just-
And
She
now,
did, good for her.
the church doesn't really have anything
The
to
formal
do
place
with
to put
us,
it.
so.
And she's still keeping it.
She's still on it, good for her.
Well, I
That's
figured
good
it'd
for
be
her.
worse if she didn't.
Yeah, I know, that's for sure. We'll tell her I said hello.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Right here.
Oh,
Need a notice.
As being a gentleman,
Yeah.
very much.
his mother said so.
Good. Don't they all?
You better be.
Yeah. Looking down.
You're gonna get in trouble if
They still speak. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Take care, Al. Was there an ask in that?
coming.
Oh,
I'm looking for the line.
It's coming.
Yeah, me too.
okay,
Do you want to do budget stuff next?
yeah, let's do budget stuff.
Okay, so, this is the point in our budget cycle where we revise, our revenue projections. Usually we're looking at a more favorable revision. Right now, it's not so much. So they've come down slightly since we first met. We're still tracking it. The most significant is probably the motor vehicle. I don't know, you could probably speak to this better than I, Marshall, but it seems like there must be less new cars being purchased,
No.
more, I don't know what we're seeing, but,
For last year,
yeah,
the number of new vehicles purchased was just about level with the year before. This is nationwide.
nationwide,
Yeah.
okay. Well, it's not happening here in Newbury,
I don't
because
know, I feel like mine alone should support the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
From 19 to 20, we're seeing a little drop. In February is when we get the big motor vehicle excise commitment from the registry, and it's slightly lower than we had hoped to see.
Yeah.
So we revised them accordingly, and then naturally, the first blush of the budget, we go through, and we try to consider everything that everyone's requested. You know, you're always hoping that when you get to the bottom, there'll be a zero or not a negative number, but unfortunately, this year's budgeting cycle is going to be a little bit more difficult than what we faced the last couple of years. There, you know, just in looking down the line items, which are on the just behind, at the very back, behind the regular reports that you get. I included the December reports just for your review. But if we start looking through the operating budget proposals, there are a number of increases that are much more significant than we've seen in previous years. Just, you know, looking down briefly, the first one that we see that's significant is the town clerk. Next budget cycle, fiscal year 2021. I've been working with the town clerk to try and figure out a way to do succession planning, to train a new town clerk to take over, but unfortunately, yeah, there it is. The woman who is the assistant town clerk doesn't have any desire to move into the town clerk's role. The last few times, I want to say the last 3 town clerks, we've had an assistant town clerk that aspired to move into the town clerk role. So although it's still an elected position, it worked out so that that person won the election. So that was great. It's a little bit more difficult in the planning endeavors when you have an elected office. Leslie and I have talked about this a lot over the years. How could we, you know, she feels that it's very important to have a resident sitting in the town clerk's role. So we had talked about, well, could you have it an appointed position with a residency requirement, or what's the best way to do this? So at this point, what we're planning on is hiring someone, and we've had a couple of candidates come through the hiring processes that would be interested in pursuing this. Hire them as a full-time assistant town clerk, go through a full election cycle, so go through the year working under the town clerk. So that only gives them a year. Most times the assistant has served under the clerk for a number of years before they run for the elected office. So at least it would give a full year for that person to work under Leslie. Now, there's still no guarantee that they would win the election.
Okay.
So that's still an issue.
Is this a recommendation that should come from us to the selectmen, that we Well, hear me out.
don't know.
Because of the idea of having a qualified applicant and work on the merits of their job, which is a full-time job,
Yeah,
rather than an elected one, which is a political position, we would recommend that this transfer, this one position, from an elected to an appointed position, or a hired position, basically, where they would fit in the hierarchy. And when it failed, it was part of a bigger piece, which had.
it was, yeah.
Yep, okay. So it had our constables in it. And people felt very strongly about the constables representing the town and being elected. But the town clerk was thrown in there, and you had to either get them all or you get none of them. And we got none of them. And I don't mind the constables being elected, that's perfectly fine, because one, they have a limited amount of work to do during the year. And number two, their job is pretty easy. So they get up, they read the warrants, we used to use them for counting, we don't use them for counting anymore.
No,
And so I think that if it is just a single position rather than the whole gamut of positions, we could move that one through with the argument that we would make at the town meeting, that we require someone whose capabilities we can judge before giving them the job, and we cannot do that with an elected official.
That makes perfect sense.
I mean, anybody could run to be the town clerk, whether they're trained for it or not.
it's happened in other towns.
Yes,
I'm
That could make
sure.
all of this planning money wasted.
yes.
Right.
Yeah, and
Whereas-
if you amended the Selectmen Administrator Act and you put in there, we did talk, Leslie and I spoke to Lisa Mead about it, and you can put a residency requirement in there, so you can
Yep.
be that specific, appointed, and then
Yeah, I've seen it
must
happen
be a
in other
resident.
towns with a residency
Yeah.
requirement.
But they also need to have the training.
Well, that's the other thing.
That's right, I mean,
Ahead of just being appointed, oh, Susie, oh, sure, you can
well,
do
the-
that. No,
I
you
think-
need to
I
be
think the-
trained.
the wording appointed is almost a misnomer in itself,
Right.
where it's a competitive job application.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not like I have these three friends, I'm going to appoint one of them to
Right.
that. No, they have, there's a specific requirement of both the willingness and the talent to do this job. So
There's
we could-
a certification.
There is a certification program.
And they have to keep going into training for
Yep.
that as well.
Yeah.
So, should I, from this board,
Yeah.
write to the selectmen?
May I throw a wrench in the works or play
Sure,
devil's
go ahead.
advocate, however you want to say it? Liking the idea of town residency requirement. Is it possible that we run into a situation where we limit ourselves and are unable to find the qualified applicant in an aging town with a small population?
Yes, and that does happen, and if that happens, you can ask for a waiver.
Oh.
That happened in Haverhill, they had town requirements, residency requirements. They would give a person a period of time, and if it was deemed that that person could not be replaced with the talent that showed up in a search within the town, they could get a waiver that continued that.
Makes sense. Just
So
wanted to
there
make sure that we
is
didn't-
some existing precedent for that.
And I should mention to you too, this entire budget includes a 2% increase for all of the non-represented employees as well. So that's the first one that's a little bit challenging. It's like, how do you do the planning? How do you get someone in when you can't predict that they would win the election, so.
But here's a wrinkle.
Yeah.
How many people are qualified that live in town, that are qualified, that have the training to be a town clerk?
Well, that's the
Right now,
section
one.
that he just.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, two, probably two.
Yeah.
And Leslie, the
Yeah.
previous town clerk, I don't know how many
Yeah.
of the other previous clerks were in town. They have the Massachusetts certifications, but I don't
I
know.
think most of them lived here in town
Oh, they all did.
previously.
Oh, yeah, it was always elected.
Yeah, you had to be in
Yeah.
Always
town to be
elected, yeah.
elected.
Yeah, that's not difficult.
I'm not sure what,
But,
Newbury
but in order to be
wants in that
appointed, you
respect.
have to have certain qualifications.
Right.
If you don't have those qualifications, you can't be appointed.
Well, it was not well, I was there when it was voted down, and it was not well presented.
Mm.
And the fact that it was not simply one, which makes sense, but all of these two positions, one of them made sense, one of them didn't, where I think, from my point of view, it was voted down with the idea that you could come back and separate it out. So, but I will write to the board and make that suggestion.
Okay, then, we have the issue of public buildings that we just heard tonight, so I'll contact, right now, all of our public building utilities, expenses, repairs, maintenance are all in that section. They're all performed by the DPW director, who also serves as our facilities manager. Not sure how we take them out, if we have to, I'll follow up with them, and you may see a different presentation depending on what we hear from them. We did renegotiate 2 new contracts. The police department collective bargaining agreement, and which 2021 will be the second year of their contract, and the DPW, the Teamsters contract was recently negotiated. It has not yet been ratified. So this is projecting based on our negotiations. The fire department salary and wage line item, on page 3, you see an increase of about $142,341. That's a pretty significant jump. That is what I asked the chief to do, is provide me a number based on the conversations that have been going on for about the last year. Instead of us moving in the direction that we've been going, the 5-year plan, trying to add coverage, a few evenings of coverage each year, so that we made sure it was sustainable and we didn't have to add and then cut, which we had had a history of doing previously. What would it take to get us to 7 nights a week overnight coverage? And so that's the number. Pretty significant. I will tell you, going in right now with these numbers as they're presented here, we're looking at a deficit of over $300,000. So obviously, we can't go into town meeting with a deficit. We have to have a balanced budget. That's one of the things. Chief Janvrin and I were talking about it. It's like, okay, so we're adding really new programming, new coverage that doesn't exist right now. We've got between 3 and 4 overnights of coverage currently, and that would go from 3 to 4 to 7. rather than adding another night or two this year. This is going to the full 7-night coverage. So is that something where it's such a significant jump, it's a big increase? Is that something you bring to the voters and say, okay, we want to add this new programming, this new coverage, here's an override?
Yeah, that would be an override.
You know, or do we present, do you want to do it, continue on the plan and do a couple more nights and add it gradually? I mean, those are the conversations, like, I really can't guide you. That has to be from what you think is best politically, what.
When we get into this, we get into the school budget,
Right.
and we look at the library, and we look at other things that have come down the pike that look like, gee, that's a good idea, but we're not going to fund that. There are some of them that we have to look at funding and say, you know, this is fine to look at, but the town has to realize that we don't have the money for it for good reasons. This goes back to, literally back to 2009, where we had both a crash and the idea that there is a structural deficit, and there will always be a structural deficit. Are you familiar with structural deficits? Yes? Yes. Okay. So, the only way we can get out of those is with an override.
And the guiding philosophy for what the selectmen have directed me to do in the past is, although we're not going to be able to address structural deficits, we have to be conservative in adding new programming, because it seemed like for a number of years there wasn't much of a climate for overrides. So, you know, it's make it work within the existing budget. We're still down, like you talk about 2009, we're still down 60 PW workers from where we are in 2009. We're still down in library days open from where we were in 2009. You know, there's a lot of things that we'll never get back up to where we were, and hopefully you don't have to. But in terms of adding something significant like that, and in conjunction with the educational, the Triton piece of the educational operating budget, what we have done from a policy perspective in terms of probably the last 10 years is we've looked at all of our new revenues, we've seen what we have, what we can anticipate for new growth, and we say, okay, we know education has historically been 50% of our operating budget. We want to make sure we maintain it at least that level. So 50% of any new monies that the community receives will automatically push those aside into that pocket, you know, and the rest we can use to fund our operating budget. If we were to follow, and we don't always follow it exactly, you know, if we need an extra 20 grand, we fund it. Yeah. But if this year, you know, we'd be looking at more of about 250,000, you know, to fund education, and 250 to fund town initiatives. So that's, you know, automatically off the top would be a $250,000 override for education. So now you're looking at fire and education, or do we fund a portion of it, or, and, you know, again, those are the political questions that I can't answer. We have alternatives in ways to fund them. Do we do it over a period of years? Do we do part of it this year? Do we split some of it within our operating budget, some of it as an override? For example, last year where we had excess funding because the regional school budget was reduced, we put an extra $200,000 into our stabilization fund. So I would say to you, okay, normally we'd give, you know, the school $200,000. Well, now we have that other $200,000 because we were very disciplined. We didn't spend it, on another recurring operating expense. We put it in stabilization for that 1 year, knowing that we would be facing additional increases. So maybe we put that 200 there and we only go for $100,000 override. You know, these are all,
It seems there are a lot of moving parts.
there are
And
this year, for sure.
the one thing I'm thinking about is the override, the last time we had the school override.
Mhm.
And there being a conversation that it shouldn't have been just for the schools, so that the schools bore the brunt of the all or nothing.
I disagree with that based on, again, the policy, excuse me, that we've been following, because at that point in time, there was no other operating budget that was exceeding 2% or 2.5%. So in that given
Right.
year, that's why. But here, now we've got operating
We have
budgets that
several.
are exceeding 2%, so I agree with you.
And yeah, you
It
don't want to
shouldn't just
see
be
library
education.
compete against fire against.
Exactly, exactly. So I would absolutely subscribe to that thinking this year, this budget scenario.
This would be one, though, that if we totaled up all of these things and said, you know, we're looking at $600,000, that would be a huge pill to swallow.
Mhm.
Right.
And I don't think we could do all of it, but I think we could do a portion of it, whether it's $200,000, $300,000 on an override. And we have to go back and basically, I think we have to, you know, and the graphs are a wonderful way of doing it, but explain the fact that we have this this problem that is always going to plague us with Proposition 2.5, that there's a structural deficit
Yeah.
built into this whole system. And that, you know, it's like saying, we're going to starve you to death a little bit at a time until you have to go out and get a real meal and catch up again, and it's going to starve you again a little bit at a time.
And this year, both the town and Triton were really fortunate in our health insurance premium increases was low. It was low.
Mhm.
We've been looking at, you know, close to
Yeah.
double digits over the last few years. This year, ours, I think we need to add one plan, but our overall percentage increase, it's staying relatively level. So in a normal year, we'd be looking at a significant increase there too, and we got a little break. So we've got town clerk, fire, education,
And the library's looking for that 27
library.
grand over 4 years, is that correct?
that's not what they presented. They presented the full 27 this year.
Need to,
That's what I heard her say over 4 years, but the budget proposal
Well,
that they
4
submitted.
years, they have 4 years to satisfy
Mm.
this, and when you pressed her on that point, she did say yes, but they're looking at funding somebody,
Yes, a position,
and so if they're funding a position, they need it when the person starts.
right.
So
Right.
yes, even though it is 4 years, you're right, Joe.
Right. So DPW, they're looking for 50,000, but that's twofold. That's a new collective bargaining agreement, and that was, what we've been trying to do is get them to the median point of the comparative data that we've been evaluating, to get them to the midpoint. They were a little bit on the low side, but we also had one of our personnel, we have 2 open positions, yes, we have a laborer and we have an equipment operator position open, truck driver, equipment operator it's called. The laborer has passed all of his examinations and certifications, his CDL, his hoist
Oh, okay.
engineer, received all those. So he's going to move into
He's going to a truck.
the higher position, which will leave our laborer position unfilled, and we're not gonna fill that this year. But that, between those 2 things, we end up in the $50,000 increase. So that's a big bump that we haven't seen in previous years there. Library, we just discussed, and that's, you know, that's pretty much the biggest increases that we're looking at, so. Big issues.
Do we have a total?
Yeah, I just noticed you only have to page 5. You do have a total. I'll resend you the extra pages. I don't know, she must have run out of paper.
But as of right now, it looks like the snow and ice will be.
Well,
Yes,
So,
knock on wood, 27,000.
that's great, because the balance, the unexpended balance in that account will close out to free cash.
Right.
So that's
Mhm.
good, that's good
Keep
news.
keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know.
Going into next
You had
week,
to
we're
say it, Joe.
April Fools,
Yeah.
here we go.
Oh
Yeah,
my God,
But,
have you had those before?
just saying.
so the
But
total,
even so, I don't think we can use up that whole budget.
the total requested budget is a little bit over 21 million, 21.3 million, but I'll email it out to you.
Okay.
So I'll fine tune it, you know, we'll go through, we'll make some small adjustments, but definitely not $300,000 worth of,
That would be tough to get past.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got it on this one.
Yep.
Yeah, 21,303.
Yep. And again, we're not seeing the increases in revenues that we've seen in the past, so that's compounding. You know, rates are dropping. So this isn't great.
Mhm.
I'm not, the sky isn't falling or anything like that. It's not panic time by any means, but we'll close the gap, but it's just, you know, we've been able to pretty much maintain everything that we've had, and we would likely be able to maintain, but there are a few initiatives, and if there's alternative ways to address them, I'm certainly open to hearing.
Level services, doable.
Yep, yep.
The school budget is,
About 6%.
yeah,
Yeah. I received the notification from the treasurer today with the
Yeah.
assessment, the official assessment, so that's generally what I wait to receive before I fill in the numbers because, and I still don't have an assessment from Whittier or Essex Tech. I've had conversations with their business managers, but I don't have an official assessment, they haven't voted yet.
Tracy, what's the apples to apples, 21 versus 20, all in percentage up?
3.1. Not unreasonable, you know,
No.
but remember, we've got that 2.5 cap. And when our revenues, when our estimated revenues aren't as robust as they have been in, you know, the past 5 to 7 years, that's when the 2.5 becomes 2.
yeah.
And they're, because I hadn't heard that the budget was set for tracking with even with the negotiations not having
Been completed, but I got the
He seemed
letter
fairly,
from
yeah, he seemed fairly confident in the numbers he had. Yeah,
I think I got that letter, a copy of that as well.
Yep. That, you know, there are times between now and town meeting, things still change. There's still a lot that's fluid in the operating budget, both for us and for Triton. But by the 31st, by the end of the month, when we have the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, they're generally, the numbers from Triton are pretty solid. And then we'll be looking at a draft town meeting warrant as well. Nothing has been set in stone. We were gonna do it at the night of the 10th, but the board didn't take it up, so we'll be taking it up. I'm sorry, not the 10th, the last meeting, the end of February. We'll be taking it up hopefully on the 10th. So we'll run through the quick draft of what's been presented to me for special articles. As soon as they give it the blessing, so to speak, I'll shoot that right out to you guys, so you'll have an opportunity to review it. But I didn't know if you would need to meet prior, or if you feel comfortable taking your vote in the joint meeting. We'll have to post the 31st.
I think we've posted the 31st for our meeting.
I have the agenda, I haven't posted it yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You've done it both ways in the past, so I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
what your preference is. But.
Well, with this budget, I think if we could get a joint meeting, I think that would be better.
Okay.
Prior to the first one.
Well, the 31st would be the joint meeting. I didn't know.
31st, we're already on.
Right, no, I didn't know if you were talking about another one prior to.
I didn't know if you wanted to meet alone as a board before that meeting. If you need to.
Well, we got the 17th and the 24th.
Right.
We could meet on the 24th. We could set up a meeting on the 24th and see what we have coming from the selectmen
Yep.
before we meet.
I'll
with
get
them
it to you
on the
right
20th.
after the 10th.
Okay.
Some of the bylaws aren't finalized. I know it was a little unusual this year. We have zoning bylaws coming in from the planning board, but we also have a couple of zoning bylaws, I think 3, that have come in by petition.
Really?
Yeah, so 30 years, I've never seen it done that way. So we're working with town council as well as with GR Legal to say, okay, how does this work? Because if there are some items in there that would likely not be approved by the Attorney General's office because they don't meet their legal bar, it's like, well, what do we do? Because it's by petition, so you can't amend it. You can't amend it, you have to put it on in the same manner that it's presented to you. So we're kind of wrangling through that right now with the planning board.
Would we not be able to say at town meeting, like, if passed, this does not?
Yes, you can say that. You can, and, you know, the selectmen and council would certainly put a recommendation in the booklet. You generally, the FinCom doesn't usually, you usually do will of the town for the zoning.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so,
If it's not a financial issue, we don't weigh in on it.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find you a meeting location.
Down in the hallway downstairs.
Well, the good news is the fire station is almost completely done. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's done, but when they finish that, we'll have that location, and we're also negotiating with Protection One. Our lease is up there, and the leadership of Protection One isn't opposed to us having an occasional meeting over there as well, since we lease the
Yeah.
facility,
We
so
used
that'll
to.
be great.
We used to have our
Thank
meetings
you.
over there,
Yeah.
FinCom meetings over there.
Yep.
And then they got mad at us and threw us out.
It's a much longer drive from.
That would never happen in Byfield.
Yeah, it'll be a whole nother minute.
Yeah, I know.
So. Well, this is gonna be a not-he problem to solve.
They're big issues.
Um,
It's certainly within the realm of resolution, but it's gonna take a lot of wrangling.
We'll see what the selectmen have to say about it as well.
Mm.
All right, and I'll get this letter off to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow,
Okay.
so, and then they can add it to the warrant
Consideration, yep.
if they want to.
Can't make everybody happy.
No, of course not,
No.
but,
Try. When I first started in municipal government, I can remember being so excited and green and thinking this is great, it's gonna make everybody happy and solve everyone's problems, and now it feels like if everybody gets up from the table a little bit mad, you've really accomplished something. You know?
Thumbs up.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Only a little pissed off.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
well, I think we've got this done until the 24th.
Got it.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'll post that, I'll get that posted
Yeah, you
out
better
to you
remind us.
as
So
well.
there, what is the 17th, Marshall, you had mentioned that, besides St. Patty's Day?
That's capital planning.
That's the 19th, with capital planning.
Did go to a meeting on St. Patrick's Day.
But I want to have the capital planning before
Irish, we
we
can't
get
do that.
to our
To the
next
same-
Just speaking of road the whole time.
Yeah. And
Have to
did you see
agree.
my email? But the rec committee wanted to come to the capital planning committee. They're
Yes,
debating on whether or not to bring the basketball courts forward.
I'm gonna call them and just say,
Okay.
don't do that. Okay?
I think you have a little upper hand with them.
Well, no, it's not that I have an upper hand, but I'm gonna tell them, we are struggling right now, and to get a basketball court thrown on top of the budget at this point is simply not gonna fly, and I'm gonna save you the heartache of doing that at this point.
It's a little bit of a conundrum because we've been so good about saving our money in the stabilization fund, and we have available funds that we could do the construction, but we don't have any room in our operating budget for the maintenance. So you have to think about those things as well.
So, well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn if someone was of that ilk.
Joe says, yeah.
Yes,
Joe?
motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.